Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Black, will open the Senate with prayer.
Let us pray. O God, our shield and fortress, we thank you for your unfailing love. Look with favor upon our senators. Guide them around the obstacles that hinder their progress, uniting them for the common good of this great land. Lord, enable them to go from strength to strength as they fulfill your purposes for their lives in this generation. Striving to please you, help them to stand for right and leave the consequences to you. Lord, give them a sense of partnership with you in seeking your best for all phases of our national life. We pray in your mighty name. Amen.
Will you please join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. President.
The senator from Iowa.
There has been a lot of finger wagging across the aisle by both Senate and House Democrats about accepting election results. Most of that has been related to whether or not Trump would concede the results of the election to Biden. But obviously there's somewhat of a double standard, because these same Democrats are mum about a looming challenge to the certified results of the election of Iowa's 2nd congressional district. Representative-elect Miller Meeks won by 6 votes, and that was after careful recounts conducted and certified on a bipartisan basis according to Iowa law. On election night, the Democratic candidate lost. A few days later, 2 counties were recounted, and the Democratic candidate still lost. Then the Democratic candidate asked for a recount of all 24 counties. And after that recount, the Democratic candidate lost. A day later, the Secretary of State of Iowa certified the election, just like the Secretaries of States of our 50 states certified their election in the presidential election. Now the Democrat opponent chose not to make a case under Iowa law to a judicial panel headed by the Chief Justice of Iowa, presumably because there was no legal case. Now what happens? The next step is that candidate under a 1969 federal law can ask the House of Representatives to set aside Iowa's election law and overturn Iowa's certified election results through a purely political process, which could presumably have a Democrat majority of 202 or 222 in the U.S. House overturn the votes of 400,000 Iowans. Now, getting back to what seems to be a double standard, if Democrat leaders do not nip this in the bud now, they have no room to point fingers at any other member of Congress. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
our bipartisan discussions are continuing to make significant headway toward another relief package for the American people. Democratic leaders, Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, and I have been working around the clock for several days now. The talks remain productive. In fact, I'm even more optimistic now than I was last night that a bipartisan bicameral framework for a major rescue package is very close at hand. Well, let's face it though, Mr. President, it doesn't help struggling Americans keep their jobs or endure unemployment or pay their rent or get vaccines any faster to keep hearing that we're having good discussions. What families across the country deserve, what they have needed and deserved for months now, is an outcome. Another targeted relief package to get more assistance into the hands as fast as possible. Struggling small businesses owners have already waited too long for a targeted second round of PPP. Laid off workers have already waited too long to have expiring programs extended. Kids, teachers, and families have already waited too long for funding to help schools reopen safely. We've already waited too long to fully fund vaccine distribution, so our scientists' historic sprint towards a safe and effective vaccine is followed up by an equally important logistical effort. This has been an unbelievably hard year for our country. We've seen normal daily life grind to a halt and take a record-setting economy right down with it. And even as we've watched doctors, nurses, and researchers make life-saving history, we've lost more than 300,000 Americans entirely too soon. Like I've said, the Senate will be right here until an agreement is passed, whenever that may be. We'll just continue voting. There's some more well-qualified nominees for important posts that we can confirm in the meantime. So let's finish our business for the American people. Now, on a completely different matter, Mr. President, I jump at any opportunity to praise my incredible staff. I'm just sorry that one natural occasion is when great people head toward the exits. Phil Maxson of Lexington, Kentucky, has mastered one of the toughest jobs on Capitol Hill. As Chief of Staff for my personal office, he oversees the operation that delivers for Kentucky families and Kentucky priorities. Here's what that role means in our tight-knit organization. It's like being the player-coach on an old baseball team, who's also a utility player at the same time. Phil wears about 10 hats each day, orchestrating a seamless operation. He's mastered policy, political strategy, messaging, constituent services. He's budgeted and managed the office itself. And Phil is also a liaison and colleague to my leadership office here in the Capitol. He's the linkage between the two sides of my operation, the single person most responsible for helping me harmonize home state priorities with my national duties and keep the Commonwealth at the center of all I do. It's a tall order. It takes the best of the best, someone who's so capable that every important issue will involve them, but so humble that situations never become about them. Enter Phil Maxson, a kind, cheerful, and unbelievably competent servant leader whom I'm convinced nobody on this planet dislikes. Phil climbed the Capitol Hill ladder the old-fashioned way. He joined my team as an intern a decade ago. Actually, I think Phil may have snuck a late application into a last-minute opening. If I'm right about that, then his good fortune was ours as well. He's done every job: legislative correspondent, legislative assistant, legislative director, and then the top spot. As one of his old bosses reminded me recently, every time a gap in the office appeared, Phil was the natural choice to fill it. It's not like he elbowed his way up. It's that circumstances and our needs kept pulling him up. He's that good. For the past decade, Phil has walked into every meeting, every markup, every normal day at the office, and every grueling, far-flung codel with total preparation, complete professionalism, and the score of the latest UK game. Another former supervisor of his put it this way: I don't think I ever asked Phil a single question he didn't already know the answer to or didn't find the answer within about 10 minutes. That's high praise when your portfolio ranges from U.S.-Burma relations to the bill grants that improve our roads and everything in between. It helps that Phil is a Kentucky thoroughbred through and through. The man really is dyed in the bluegrass. As a young man in Lexington, he found part-time work giving tours at Henry Clay's Ashland estate. He also graduated from Henry Clay High School. You could say the Senate was a natural destination. Here, he met UK coach Calipari, President Netanyahu, and families from Kentucky's smallest towns. And they all got exactly the same intention, enthusiasm, and warmth from Phil Maxson. He clicks with everyone. He's as affable as he is intelligent. In a town full of big egos and sharp elbows, he stands out because he doesn't try to stand out. For the better part of a decade, virtually every significant win we've notched for our Commonwealth has had Phil at its nucleus. But if you drop by the staff meeting the day after, what you'd hear is Phil explaining why everyone else deserves more credit than he does. Why it really all came down to my leadership or his peers' efforts or the hard work of the junior folks beneath him. In other words, everyone else but him. You'd have to go to everyone else to learn that Phil was the human glue that, in fact, held it all together. It'd take me all day to list every win Phil helped quarterback for our home state. The state-of-the-art chemical weapons destruction facility in Madison County, the transfer of the Rochester Dam to local ownership, a new wildlife refuge in Henderson County, environmental cleanup and health benefits for nuclear workers in Paducah, the planned construction of a new VA hospital in Louisville, freedom to fish, and the raising of Lake Cumberland, and many, many more. But alas, Mr. President, his dedication to Kentucky is so all-encompassing that he and his wife, Sarah Beth, have decided they don't want to raise their young family anywhere else. So Bea and Phil on Capitol Hill, as friends have called them, plus their two boys, Barbara and Theodore, are homeward bound. I made the same decision myself as a young man, trading in the life of a Senate staffer for a move back home. So I can't exactly fault his decision. Phil needs to spend fewer breakfasts and dinners with me and more of his own burgeoning clan. I get it, but I'm sure sorry to see him go. Phil is the kind of Senate all-star who deserves a full-dress curtain call. He deserves toast and a dinner and a big farewell party. I regret that in these bizarre pandemic times, a floor speech will have to suffice. at least for right now. So, Phil, thank you for your years of dedication to the state we both love. We'll miss your brain, we'll miss your heart. You're leaving behind one heck of a fan club all throughout the United States Senate. We wish you all the best in the chapters ahead. I suggest that for the court.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander. Mr. President,
Senator from Oklahoma.
I ask that the quorum call in progress now be vitiated.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will proceed to executive session to resume consideration of the following nomination, which the clerk will report.
Nomination, the judiciary, Fernando L. Aena Rocha of California to be United States District Judge for the Central District of California.
Mr. President,
Senator from Oklahoma.
Mr. President, I want to make an observation here because I've been serving for quite some time in the United States Senate, and a lot of things that are said on the Senate floor are not really all that significant, and yet the members who are delivering messages believe they are, or they wouldn't be doing it. So that's what this is all about. This is a deliberative body, and some things are maybe not all that significant. What I am about to say is significant. So I would like to have the attention of anyone who wants to know that in the midst of all the problems that we're facing now, some good things are happening. I want to mention something that is significant that I don't think you've thought of. I say to the presiding officer that is that tomorrow is the 153rd day of the year. That's very significant. That is December 19th. People have not stopped to realize the significant things that have happened on December 19th throughout our history and the history of the world, going all the way back to December the 19th of the year 1154. That was when Henry II became King of England. We haven't really thought about the fact that what that does mean to us today, but we will before long. In 1843, December 19th, Charles Dickens wrote the Christmas Carol. Now that's the most watched, listened to, and sung event every Christmas, and it has been for all that time. In 1932, December 19th, the British Broadcasting Corporation, that's the BBC, we're all familiar with that, but that's when it started, 1993, December 19th, it began transmitting overseas. Now that was the beginning of a whole new world of knowledge and understanding. In 1950, December 19th, NATO named General Dwight D. Eisenhower as Supreme Commander of the Western European Defense Forces. Then in 1972, December 19th, Apollo 17, the last of the Apollo moon landings, returned to Earth. Then in 1984, December 19th. I remember this well because I was there when this happened. I was in Hong Kong when this happened. That was when China signed an accord returning Hong Kong to the Chinese sovereignty. A lot of people thought it was a good idea at the time to accept the people from Hong Kong. I was there, and look what has happened now after all these years. I would have to say that created a hysteria that has continued to this day. Then in 1998, December 19th, United States President Bill Clinton was impeached. I was there for that one too. That was December 19th, 1998. But the event that is more significant by a landslide is what happened on December 19th of 1959. December 19th, 1959, my wife Kay and I got married. And that makes tomorrow our 61st wedding anniversary. Just look at all the beauty that has followed us, 20 kids and grandkids, all of that in a 61-year period of time. What I want to say is the beautiful life that we are still having together. And Kay, I love you more now than I did 61 years ago. And I say to the Senate leadership that you better get this last vote done by tonight, or you'll have to do it without me, because I'm going to be with Kay on our anniversary on Saturday, the 61st wedding anniversary. And to everyone else out there, as you celebrate the birth of Christ at Christmas time, I'm going to say to you, Merry Christmas and God bless you. and I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The Assistant Minority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask the quorum call be suspended.
We're not in a quorum call.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm sorry I didn't come to the floor quickly enough to wish my friend Jim Inhofe and his wife the best. He is one of the real contributors in the United States Senate, has been for years. He's a special individual. He decided to take an interest in the continent of Africa. I don't know that there's another senator who knows as much about that continent as he does. He's been there so many times. His stories, many of them relate to countries which few people have heard of. He's made a special point to understand that continent, the people on it, in addition to his responsibilities serving the state of Oklahoma, and of course now as chairman of the Armed Services Committee, his responsibility for funding the Department of Defense. He and our Democratic colleague, Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island, have done a remarkable bipartisan job on that defense appropriation, authorization, let me add. And I sincerely hope that the President will sign that bill. His objections to it have nothing to do with the military or the defense of our country. They relate to issues which are thorny political issues, but shouldn't slow down our authorization of these critical programs. And this authorization bill comes at an exceptional time. We have been learning over the last few weeks about a massive cybersecurity breach of our government, probably by the Russians. It has all the earmarks and fingerprints of a Vladimir Putin project, an ongoing effort by Russia to undermine the United States, to compromise our national security, and to create chaos whenever possible. We learned of it 4 years ago in the 2016 election when every intelligence agency of our government agreed that the Russians were meddling in our election and doing their best to subvert the will of the American people. We made strong statements in opposition to it, and we took action. Some of it has been publicly reported, and some of it has been disclosed to members of Congress in a classified setting. We were successful in thwarting their efforts in the 2018 election, and I want to salute all of those who were responsible for that effort. And in 2020, I believe the same can be said. We'll know more as we sift through the evidence. But this latest disclosure is really troubling. We believe that beginning in March of this year, that the Russians started compromising our cybersecurity network in many different ways. Every day, there's a new disclosure of another agency that reports that they have somehow wheedled their way into this important critical information. How much they know, what they've gained, how much they've compromised us, we don't know yet. It certainly is unnerving, and it deserves a very thorough investigation as to how we failed. You see, the United States was not taking anything for granted. We were literally spending billions of dollars for the safety of these security systems. And we knew that included in those systems was information which is essential for the protection of the United States. To think that that has been compromised at the hands of one of our implacable foes is certainly unnerving. I believe that we should initiate a thorough and complete investigation. Let the chips fall where they may. Establish where we have failed from a technology viewpoint, and if any individuals are responsible, that they be held accountable. At the same time, I have to say that I joined the presiding officer in commenting on one particular aspect of this that I just can't understand. The White House has been virtually silent as all of these facts have unfolded by the day. I cannot understand that, why the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America has not spoken out forcefully against the Russians for their involvement in this cybersecurity breach, why he has not likened this to a virtual invasion of the United States when it comes to our own national security. I believe that we should have been firm from the beginning and honest with the American people as well about the nature of this threat. But instead, this president has been silent. I recall not that long ago, a few months ago, we found evidence that the Russians were offering bounties on the heads of American soldiers in Afghanistan. Outrageous and unthinkable, and yet the White House was silent, refused to respond to what I know, because I've seen it, was credible evidence that this was linked directly to Moscow and the operatives of the Russian government. The attempted assassination of Navalny, the dissident in Russia, has been well documented, and yet again, our White House, our president, are silent. I don't understand it. I'm hopeful that the new president, Joe Biden, when he takes office January 20th, will make it a priority to establish a new understanding and relationship with Vladimir Putin. The United States cannot be a victim of Putin over and over again without speaking out and more. I'm counting on Joe Biden to do that. I believe he will. He's a realist. I know he wants peace in the world, and I do too. But we also must defend this country. And the men and women in uniform who risk their lives every single day should be our highest priority. I'm heartened by Joe Biden's closing that he's using in all of his public speeches now. He, of course, says it more artfully than I will, but he calls on God to bless America, but also God to keep our troops safe. I'm sure it has special meaning to him, since the death of his son, Beau, is a reminder of the sacrifices that not only the men and women in uniform, but their families make for us every single day. I hope that that continues to be the watchword of his administration. Mr. President, there's not much activity on the floor of the Senate today. I hope there will be before the end of the day. The leaders in the Senate and House, Democrat and Republican, as well as the White House, with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, are fast at work, we're told, establishing a COVID-19 relief bill. I was part of an effort, which the presiding officer also shared, in a volunteer activity that involved about 3 weeks of endless telephone conferences and Zoom calls. Staff supported us all the way, or we couldn't have done it. But it started off with 8 of us eating dinner one night and deciding to come together as a group to see if we could break the logjam. You see, the whole notion of COVID-19 relief was dead in the water. For some reason, no action, no activity. We remembered back in March when Congress, and particularly I remember the Senate, by a vote of 96-0, passed on a bipartisan basis the largest relief bill in the history of the United States, over $3 trillion in the CARES Act, which was for addressing and fighting the pandemic as its first priority, but secondly, trying to rescue our foundering economy. Thank goodness we did that, and we came together. And we hoped that it would be a short-lived requirement, but it turned out to be much longer. Many of us anticipated by the middle of last year, or this year, that things would have come under control, but we know sadly that's not the case. And so there's been a call ever since to step back in to this theater of confrontation with this pandemic and the weakening economy. But for some reason, and I won't point fingers, we've been unable to reach any bipartisan agreement. Well, 8 of us, willful senators, 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, set out to try and get the conversation started and see what we could agree on. It was a great experience, even though there were parts of it where we could not agree, and there was a lot of frustration. There was also a lot that was constructive and encouraging. At the end of the day, we produced 2 documents. One of these documents was a $748 billion consensus document, which spelled out the things that we thought were essential as part of any COVID relief package, extending unemployment benefits for 16 weeks, including about 160,000 people in my state who claim the pandemic unemployment assistance, and 248,000 pandemic emergency unemployment compensation. Millions of Americans, 12 million Americans would have lost their unemployment compensation on the day after Christmas. Imagine that. We also, in this bill, provided assistance for small businesses, including a second round of Paycheck Protection Program loans for the hardest hit businesses, extended the eviction moratorium through January 31st, 2021, providing emergency rental assistance to help families stay in their homes, provided funding for hospitals and clinics for testing and to quickly and fairly distribute vaccines, including $500 million to Illinois for testing and vaccine distribution, and $1.5 billion for Illinois hospitals and healthcare providers. We provided $82 billion nationwide for education, $54 billion for K through 12, $20 billion for higher ed. We extended the federal student loan forbearance from its current expiration date of January 31st, 2021 through April 30th, 2021. We provided $10 billion nationwide in much needed support to the struggling child care sector. We addressed hunger by increasing SNAP benefits for nearly 2 million individuals in my state and millions more across the United States, and by providing funding for food banks and senior nutrition programs, serving more than 1.5 million people in Illinois. We provided billions for transit, including hundreds of millions of dollars for Illinois transit agencies and help for Amtrak as well. Provided billions for airports, including millions of dollars for Illinois airports and airline relief as well. Provided more than $1 billion in funding for Amtrak to prevent further furloughs. Provided millions in payroll support to protect jobs of thousands of Illinois airline workers, and provided funding to help struggling Illinois bus companies to keep their workers on the job. That's not the end of the list by any means. Part of the money that we put in here was for the logistics of the vaccinations, which are now going to take place across the United States. We provided some. I think the negotiators are adding to the amount, and I applaud them for that. What we left out of this, I think, was significant too. We did not provide any direct assistance to state and local governments. This morning I got on the telephone with a group that has been kind enough to volunteer for many years to consider the applications of individuals in Illinois who want to attend our service academies. Some of these people have been doing this for 20 years. I really respect them and thank them for doing it. I try to take myself out of that consideration so no one can ever claim political consideration was taken in any way. One of the persons who did become part of the meeting this morning was Skip Lee. Skip's the mayor of Sterling, Illinois. And he said to me, "Senator, do you provide any help in COVID relief for towns like Sterling, Illinois?" And I said, "Skip, there'll be some help, I think, but it won't be the kind of help that I wanted. I do believe we should help state and local governments." Now, I've been reminded by the presiding officer and others that every state is not the same. Every locality is not the same. Some have suffered real losses in revenue directly related to COVID-19, and some have prospered. It just depends on your circumstances. In my circumstance, the state of Illinois has paid a heavy price as a state, and the localities as well. We do not include the direct relief for state and local governments, which I'd hoped would be part of this agreement. I hope we can return to that issue soon, very quickly after the first of the year, and perhaps with the new president, and find a way to provide this relief. The alternative is awful. I know what's going to happen to a lot of the local budgets. Police officers are going to be furloughed, firefighters, teachers, healthcare workers. Just at a moment in time when we need them the most, many of these communities will be unable to continue providing those very fundamental services to keep us safe. So I hope we can get back to that as quickly as possible. Finally, Mr. President, let me say that we're all anxious to fund this government. At midnight tonight, the continuing resolution, which we passed several months ago, expires. It would be a real tragedy if we saw this government come to a close for any reason, at any time. And certainly at this moment, when our economy is so tenuous and our worries are so large over the health care of our nation, we shouldn't allow this to occur. I pray that the negotiators will be able to spend good time today and report to us soon that they have reached an agreement. It is time for us to get our work done. And like Senator Inhofe is going home to his 61st anniversary, many of us are anxious to return to our homes and families. We won't have the expansive Christmas this year that we have had in the past. Won't be reuniting with children and grandchildren who really make the holiday. But we're looking at the long run. And the long run is we want to be around for next Christmas, when instead of one tree, we're going to have two to make up for this year. I yield the floor.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President.
Senator from Texas.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be vitiated.
We're not in a quorum call. Oh, we are in a quorum call. Without objection.
Mr. President, in a few moments, I'm going to ask unanimous consent for the Senate to pass S. 2800, which is the bipartisan NASA Authorization Act. Before doing so, I want to make some brief remarks about how important this legislation is to American leadership in space and to our continued space exploration efforts. Well over a year ago, I joined with Chairman Wicker, Ranking Member Cantwell, and Aviation and Space Subcommittee Ranking Member Sinema, and we began writing the NASA Authorization Act, using as a foundation the bipartisan bill that I had previously authored with Senators Cornyn, Rubio, Markey, and then Senator Bill Nelson from last Congress as our starting point. We solicited input from hundreds of stakeholders, from individuals and academics to industry partners and even our international allies. Hundreds of pages of suggestions, proposed edits, and comments were submitted. And over many months, our staffs worked diligently through each and every submission, trying to incorporate the feedback to the greatest extent possible. And what resulted is this bill, which was marked up last year and unanimously reported. What we have achieved together is legislation that enjoys deep and broad bipartisan support, and that sets bold goals for NASA and the United States in space. It provides the direction and the infrastructure necessary to meet them. I'm very proud of the work that we've done together and of this legislation that we've assembled. And I want to express particular thanks to Senator Wicker, Cantwell, and Sinema, and to their staffs for their hard work. Our bill strengthens the United States' leadership in space, ensuring that we remain the default space exploration partner of the world. It extends the life of the International Space Station through to 2030, and it challenges us to be the international leader for lunar and Mars exploration and to reach new horizons. It's not just human exploration, though, Mr. President. By working in a collegial and good faith manner, we were able to craft a product that strengthens all of NASA's core missions, something which benefits not just states with strong NASA equities, but every American. It is amazing what strong, unified leadership can do. To bring the members of this body together working to pass vitally important legislation that advances science and technology and national security and the interest of our nation. So, Mr. President, I want to say again how grateful I am to my colleagues who worked on this bill with me, and to state just how proud I am that the Senate is speaking with one unified voice in passing this legislation. This is following a tradition that we have seen the past 8 years I've served in this body, where on the question of space, we have seen over and over and over again strong bipartisan cooperation. Even at a time when partisan division pulls us apart in so many other areas, on the question of America leading the world in space, the United States Senate speaks with one voice. We have a real opportunity here to boldly shape the nation's space exploration efforts, to inspire new generations of little boys and little girls gazing up at the stars and wondering what's out there, and to make the United States a true spacefaring nation. While this bill is not going to pass the House of Representatives during the remainder of this Congress, I look forward to the beginning of the next Congress, where we can use this unanimously approved legislation as the starting point to move quickly to pass a comprehensive NASA Authorization Act across the finish line and get it signed into law. Therefore, Mr. President, as if in legislative session, I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of calendar number 525, S. 2800.
The clerk will report.
Calendar number 525 is 2800, a bill to authorize programs of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and for other purposes.
Without objection, the Senate will proceed.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the committee-reported substitute be withdrawn, the Cruz substitute amendment at the desk be agreed to, the bill as amended be considered read a third time and passed, and that the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President.
The senator from Missouri.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be suspended.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I am here on behalf of the millions of working people in this country who are out of time, who are out of luck, and who are just about out of hope. I'm here on behalf of the millions of working people who have borne the worst of this pandemic, the people who got sent home back in March and April and May when other businesses got to stay open, when companies like Amazon and Facebook were making billions of dollars. These are the workers who lost their jobs, the workers who lost their pay, the workers who said, too bad for you. These are the people who right now are missing shifts at work to try to care for kids who are distance learning because of COVID, who are trying to care for a relative who may be sick. These are the people who are always asked to make it work, who are always asked to hold it together. And you know what, Mr. President? They do. These are proud people, the working people of our nation. These are strong people. These are the people who have rallied to this nation's defense in every hour of need, in every moment of danger, who have sent their sons and daughters to go fight our wars, who have given their time and their talents and their treasure at every opportunity for this nation. And now, Mr. President, they're in need. They're the backbone of this nation, and now they are in crisis. I'm talking about the 8 million Americans who have fallen into poverty since this summer. 12 million families